Oh, it's working. Cool. Cool. Okay. Um, I'm still like a scrub when it comes to this. Spotify. Right. All right. Cool. All right. All right. Hey guys, what's going on? Today we're going to be making Minesweeper in React. Okay. So it's just this. I know I've been missing. We're going to be making Minesweeper in React today. So this is probably going to take about an hour and a half. It was a project that I recently completed for an interview. I found it really engaging, so I wanted to make a video about it. We're going to do it completely from scratch. We're going to tackle how I create my applications in React to how from every little step to some of the little best practices as I go through making the app as we go through it. All right. So if you guys have any questions, let me know in the chat, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. But before we do that, I'm gonna put on some music because music makes everything better. So let's go do this. Uh, Spotify. Uh, if I play music, I'm afraid like YouTube is gonna like block my audio or something when I make a video out of it. So let's not do that. Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to create React app, use create React app. And if you don't know what create React app is, create React app is a basically a project starter that Facebook made that allows you to basically build a project from scratch, and they have a huge build environment with testing included, hot reloading, and they have a whole bunch of things when you want to actually build your production to put it up for production. When you want to build up your app for production. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to create a new thing. So a new project. So let me go open up my PowerShell and we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to go into here and let's go into my CD. Go into our documents, and we're gonna go into projects, and we're gonna create a new folder for YouTube. So YouTube, and we're gonna go in there, and we're going to create React app, our new project. Okay, so we're gonna say create React app, and we're gonna call this Minesweeper. Okay, boom. So now you'll see that it's installing all the packages that come with it. It comes with React, React DOM, and React Scripts. Now React Scripts is basically the whole setup, and it installs a whole bunch of different modules for it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that installs. So while we're gonna go ahead and wait for that to install. And then once that, easy, done. I personally use Yarn. If you don't know what bad video settings, please use a keyframe. How do I fix that? What? How do I? Wait, what? I don't know how to. Please use a keyframe frequency of 4 seconds or less. Currently, keyframes are not being sent often enough, which will cause buffering. What? What does that even mean? Okay. I'm just gonna ignore that for now. Let me know in the chat if it's like laggy or something. I don't know what that means. All I know is that it's a red up there, and red's never good. But okay, so let's go ahead and CD into Minesweeper. All right, cool. You can see me clear. Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and actually now that we created our project, we're gonna go and open it up in Visual Studio Code. Okay. So let's go close our terminal and let's open it. So open folder, projects, YouTube, and Minesweeper. Ba-ba-da-da. Awesome. All right, this is gonna be a little big, so we're gonna close that. And now, because VS Code comes with a terminal inside of it, now I can do all of my terminal stuff right in here, which is gonna be perfect. So, and we're not gonna be doing that much stuff. So let's go ahead and start up our project. And you'll see it's running React scripts. It's starting up my development server, which plopped over here. All right, welcome to React, baby. Let's go. Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. So just so we can go through some of the idea of Minesweeper, let's go look at a basic game of Minesweeper, right? So Minesweeper, sure, play free online Minesweeper, right? So the game basically works like this. You have there's multiple parts to it. So you have this in the top left, you have the number of flags you can put down. All right, let me go through the objective. The objective of the game is to clear all of the bombs on the board by marking them with the flag. And as soon as you've marked all the bombs and cleared the rest of the squares, you win. Otherwise, you lose. So you have multiple, and that's the objective of the game. All right. So the first thing that we want to do before we ever go into creating any application, in my opinion, is to lay out the layout of, or think about all of the different components that come into your application. So if you think about it, there's multiple different components in this. You have the whole Minesweeper board, right? And let's go ahead and like just create a little list, right? So components to make, right? You have multiple components. So the first one would be this whole board, right? You have this whole board of everything that you have inside of it. So you have your board, right? So we'll say we'll create a board component. You have this, which is the count of how many mines are left. So basically, every time you put down the flag, you see that little flag there. It decrements that, or decrements that, and it keeps on going down. And you see blah 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 blah, and you can uncheck them. You right click to do that. So we'll go into here, yeah. And then as soon as you start playing, there's a little timer in the top right that goes and starts adding time as you're playing. So you see it's counting 3, 4, but this goes in the exact second. So we might change that into a little bit of a better time format, right? And you know, so you have this, and then you have a reset button. So this reset button, when you lose, you accidentally click on the bomb, so there's probably a bomb here. It turns into a sad face, and when you click on the bomb, you know, it turns into a sad face, time stops, and you can't do anything else, okay? And then when you hit that reset button, it turns back into a smiley face, all right? So now that we've got this kind of like board head, which could also be another component, so we have a board, we have a board head, we have a flag count, right? We have a reset button, and we have a timer, right? Now we go into the actual grid. So each grid, if you were to break it down, you have all of these different. Just curious, why do you use question from Julian Johnson? Just curious, why do you use VS Code? I've used it, but I use VS Community because I don't know how to debug in VS Code or use MVC. I actually have it set up at work. There is actually a new extension that allows you to do debugging straight in VS Code from your, like, between the browser and VS Code. And just like if you were coding in like C# or something, it'll actually stop. So when you put a breakpoint, it'll actually stop, which is super nice. I don't have it on right now on this computer because I'm at home, but I'll definitely make a video on that because that's one of the reasons I like VS Code, besides all of the different customization features it has. All right, so if we go back to our grid, or our board per se, we'll just call this the Minesweeper game, and we'll have Minesweeper, and then we'll just have, let's call it just game, right? And we can rename that later if we want. So in our game, we have all of these things have different rows. All these rows, and each of these rows has different items. So we're going to have a row, and then you're going to have a board item. or we're just gonna call it a square. I don't know. We'll just call it grid item. It doesn't matter. So you go through, and each of these grid items is going to have different properties associated. You know, whether it's open or not, it can be opened, whether it has a flag on there or not, whether it has a bomb in it or not, and stuff along those lines. So this is going to have a whole bunch of different properties, and that's what we're going to be manipulating. And that's pretty much it. I mean, that's all of the different components that would go into making Minesweeper. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Just so you guys see the finished result, I actually, I made sure that I, got it all working before I went and showed it to you guys. I actually have a demo up of it on my GitHub. So you see React-based Minesweeper here, and you have Minesweeper, and it works exactly like that. So you click on the square, and if you click on this, I lost. If you click on a square that has, you can open multiple, it opens multiple, and as soon as you click get all of them, you win. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do, so we have our create React app project open. So we're going to actually keep this open. I'm going to close out this welcome screen. I have Minesweeper open, correct? Yep. And now we're going to go into our SRC. So we'll go back to this. All right, so let's go ahead and start off by clearing all this random nonsense in here. So let's see. We don't care about your app.css. I don't care about the service worker. What else do I not need? I don't need a README. And yeah, don't need this logo. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and we'll remove our service worker. Right? Remove our service worker. We gotta remove that call to it. All right, and we'll go into our app.js. All right, and we'll go ahead and get rid of our logo and our app.css. And we'll remove all of the stuff in here, right? And we'll just put a div that says Minesweeper. And boom, now we're good. So if I was just to write hey, you'll see it just writes hey. I'm assuming that most people here are familiar with React and know how kind of that works. Okay? Cool. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our board, right? Because that would be the basic first step. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into here, and we're going to, the way that you want to think about it is the best way to create your apps is you have a containers and you have your components. Now, I'm not going to go into Redux here because I feel like it would be a little bit overkill for this project. So we're just going to go ahead and start doing that. So you'll see here that I'm creating a components folder, and this is where I'm going to hold all these different components that I've listed in here. Okay? So let's go ahead and full screen that so it's easier to see. So what we're going to do, so the first thing we have to make is our Minesweeper component, and we'll just have our app.js file be Minesweeper. So how about I just rename this to minesweeper.js, right? Boom. And then we'll change these to Minesweeper. All right. And we'll have in our index.js, instead of linking to app, it's going to link to Minesweeper. And this is going to be Minesweeper as well. And same here. Cool. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with Minesweeper. So what we're going to do, so like I said, the first thing we have to do is think about our board. So what we're going to do, so we're just going to have a div that's going to be Minesweeper, right? And we're going to have this div is just going to be have some set width and height. So we're just going to use this index.css file, and we're going to say .minesweeper. Right? It's going to have a width of, let's say, what's a good size? What size did I use in my project? All right, let's just go with a 500 by 500 board. Okay, so width, height, 500 pixels. Cool. And we'll give it a border of 1 pixel solid black just so we can see it. All right, boom. So now we have the basic starting of our board. All right, so let's go ahead and start creating all of our different components. So we're going to create a folder for each one, and we're going to create an index.js file for each one. So if we go through, we go look at this, we'll go through, we already have our Minesweeper.js. Let's go and create a board head, our flag count and our timer are just going to go inside of it. Or actually, we'll create one for our timer as well, because that one's going to be kind of a little bit complex. Not really. So we have our timer. We have a timer. We have our row. Right? We'll have our row. We have each item, grid item, or we could just call them cells. And finally we have the board we play with. So I called it game. I'll just call it board. Cool. Now we have all of our components. So now we can go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to go and start creating our board. And that's what we're going to use to render out our stuff. So if you don't know how React works, it all works by passing your state down through your props. So when we create our board, we're going to assume that our minesweeper.js file is passing this data all down to our board. Okay, so we're going to go into here. We're going to create our index.js, right? So first thing we're going to do is, we're going to create our React component. So I use React snippets, so that saves me time when I do that. And we'll just call this our board, okay? So we'll go into here. All right. And what we're going to do is, the first thing we want to do is we want to create a function that's going to create our board per se, right? And what's a board, right? A board is just a grid of different cells. So if you were to think of it, it's just a 2D array. So if I was to pull up Paint here, right? If you were that's not a straight line. That's also not a straight line. Whatever. You get the... Oh my gosh. Can I make this bigger? Boom. Okay, cool. So you have this, right? You could think of it as you can make an array that has a whole bunch of columns like this, right? You have columns or rows, and then you have a whole bunch of columns. Now, forgive me. I'm not I'm not drawing on a piece of paper, so I can't draw the straightest lines. But you have a 2D array. You have an array of rows, and then in each row you have an array of columns. In each, I said that backwards. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what our grid is going to be. So let's go ahead and create a function that'll create our board. Now, there's multiple ways that you can create functions in React. We're going to use ES6 in this example because I want to use, the most up-to-date features that JavaScript offers. So if we were to go and so we're going to do a create board. Let's call it create board, right? And create board is going to take in, the props that our Minesweeper.js is going to pass down, like how many mines there are, how many bombs there are, how many flags are available, and that stuff like that. So we're going to need our information passed down from there. So we're going to create our props. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start off by creating our board. So let's start off saying, creating a variable, say let board is equal to an empty array, right? We declare an empty array for our board. Now that we've done that, the next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to have to start creating our rows, and then we're going to create each column. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off a for loop. So we're going to say for, I like spacing it, so like for let I, we'll start off with I, your normal for loop, I is less than props.rows, and props.rows is a property that we're going to pass down from here. So if we wanted to, we could even just start off by saying, hey, we're going to have state equals, and we're going to say, you're going to start off, we're going to have 10 rows, we're going to have 10 columns. We're going to have how many flags in a normal, we'll just say 10 flags. We have 10 flags and 10 bombs, right? Bombs, or actually they're mines, right? It's called Minesweeper, not bomb sweeper. So we'll do 10 mines. Boom. Now we have that. So we'll go in here. So now this information, this rows, is going to be the number of rows and columns that we pass in from here when we actually create our board component. Okay, and that's why we're getting this props from. So we have props.rows, and then we're going to, I++, we're going to go into here. If anybody has any questions, make sure you let me know in the comments, all right? Or just follow along with me, all right? So for every item, for every row, we're going to add in a new array, because like I said in that paint here, we have all of these rows and each one of these is an array, right? And each one of these array items has one item in it, and each item has different properties, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to just say board.push, and we're going to push in an empty array. Simple enough, right? And then for all of our rows, it's going to push in this empty array, and then we're going to work from this array to get all of the column items. All right? And you'll notice that when you create a table, you'll know how you have a TR and then you have all the individual TDs. Same concept. Okay? So now we're going to go and we're going to loop through all of our columns. So we're going to say let j equals 0 because, I then j. And then j is less than props.columns. J++. Right? And then we're going to say that board for that item, that TD we're at, if you're thinking of rows. So at this one, we're going to push in one object. And each one of these is going to have an array with one object. Okay? So we're going to say board at our specific item, in our specific row, that item, we're going to, in this array here, so board I is going to be, this is where we're at. We're going to push in an object, right? And this is going to be each of our cells. So what do our cells need to know, right? So the things that would be helpful is the cell would probably want to know it's where it is in the row, so it's X position, where it is in the column, a Y position, how many cells are open, or a count of how many mines are near it, not cells. So they probably want to know, so like, hey, how many mines are near it? Because if there's a mine near it, then we need to set that to 1 and when we open it, right? So we'll go ahead and we'll get those in there. So we'll say our X is going to be equal to our J, so it's going to be our rows here, right? We're going to have our Y, which is going to be our row. That's our position, our X and our Y coordinates. Then we're going to have our count, which is going to be the number of nearby mines. And I'll make sure to label this so when it's all done. Now, the next thing we're going to want to know is if it's open or not. That way we can change it. So you'll see in my example, did I close it? Yeah, in my example, you can either be open or it can be closed, right? And when it's open, it can be a whole bunch of different things, so we'll have to prepare for that. But at the basic level, it needs to know if it's open or closed. So we'll say is open, false, because we're gonna all of them obviously start off as closed before we open it. Then we're going to say if it has a mine or not. So we'll start off by saying none of them have mines and none of them have a flag, right? Because that's how the game starts out. This is our initial conditions for our board. Boom. Now that we have that, if we were to go and log this, so let's go and see what our board looks like. So let's console.log our board. All right. So let's go ahead And what we're going to do is we're going to, in our constructor, we need to pass in these props that this create board is going to use. All right, so we're going to say constructor, pass in our props, and then we're going to pass in, we call our super function, which basically says we're going to instantiate a version of this component and all of its methods, and we're going to pass our props into it so we can use our props in our constructor. And we're going to say, we're going to set our state, and we're going to say this.state equals, and we're going to say the rows of our board is going to be equal to this. So we'll say create board, and we're going to pass in our props. Right? Boom. All right, awesome. Well, I don't need a semicolon there. Perfect. Now, in our Minesweeper.js, let's go ahead and import this component. So let's see. So we'll say import board from where is it? /components and our board. Go in here, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to throw in our board into here using React. So board, bada bing. Now, when you do this, we need to also pass in the number of rows and columns, because otherwise, when we console.log our board, it's not going to do anything. It's going to be an empty array. So let's go ahead and pass in our rows and our columns from our Minesweeper into our board. Okay? Debugging within VS Code should be simple with either a Node.js backend or .NET Core. React to DuckTales. Could you try and explain nested loops in your own words for a second? Oh, this is a good question. Whose man is this? I'll be posting more videos. I'll see if you upload. Yeah, I'm actually going to be posting more videos now. Yeah. All right. So that's actually a good question. This is something that I struggled with for a while too, right? So nested for loops. So if you were going for a nested for loop, let's say let's go back to our grid. This is going to be a good example, right? If we go back to our grid, if we were to create this grid, we use a nested for loop. So basically, what you'd want to do, this first for loop goes through and it creates every single, if we were to think of it in every single like stage, we want to create every single row, right? So this would be a loop. How would you go and create, 5? So if you wanted to go and loop and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It would be 1. This would be the first row, second row, third row, fourth row, and fifth row. Okay? That's it. Now, when we use our nested loop, when we go into the loop that's inside of our first for loop, when we think of it, when we're at the position I, so whatever our position is in our first for loop, we're at that position row. So if you wanted to go and add in a whole bunch of different column items or cells, it would be another for loop. It would be the same thing, and you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or how many ever columns you have. So you go in here, and then this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and you get the idea, etc., etc., etc. All right, and that's pretty much nested for loops, and then these represent each item. So then, if we were to think about it, our X position for here is equal to our row, where we're at in our row. Our Y position is where we're at in the column, and that's why nested for loops are great, because they can allow you to create this sort of 2D thing where you have things that work in your X direction and your Y direction instead of just unilaterally where it's just going one way. Okay? So that's nested for loops. I hope that helps. But yeah. All right, so we're going to go in here and we're going to pass in our rows and columns. You want to see the code again? Sure. So if you go through here, maybe if I put them side by side, right? Oh, no, that's not going to look good. All right, so we go through here, we create our whole board. And the whole board is this whole thing, right? So then, in our whole board, we're going to want to start off by creating each row. See? 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows, 5 rows. And it knows how many rows to go to because we're going to pass in this number of rows into here. So it's going to be 10 rows and 10 columns. So it would be this props.rows is going to be 10, and this props.columns is going to be 10. All right, so we're going to say I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus, a simple for loop. Okay, so then at our first row, we're going to push in an empty array, right? Basically saying in each row, we're going to have an array of columns or array of cells, right? Because each row has a whole bunch of cells inside of it. Okay? Now that we're inside at our for loop works in steps, right? So this code is not gonna go on to the next row until it runs this first set of for loops and creates all of our cells, right? So now in our row, we're going to go and we're going to create each cell, right? So we're going to go into here, and the row that we're working with is the board at our position I, or whatever row we're at, right? So we're at board of I, so board of 0 would be the first row, right? So we're going to say board of 0, we're going to push in some objects into here. In our row, where it's just going to have a whole bunch of objects. And each object is going to have an X position, which is where it is in the row, a Y position, where it is in our column, a count, which is the number of mines that's going to be near it, a number of whether it's open or not, because a cell can be either open or closed, and then you're going to have whether it has a flag or a mine in it, okay? And that's it. Okay, nothing crazy, very simple, just like that. Okay? Cool. Now that we've gone over nested for loops, let's go ahead and pass in our rows and our columns for our board. So we're going to say rows equals this.state.rows. So we're creating our board and we're passing in a property called rows, and we're going to pass in a property called columns, right? Columns, this.state.columns. Boom. Beautiful. All right, so we'll go into here, we'll save it, we'll open up our thing. Wow, look at that. Now we have, ooh, you know what would be good? Maybe if I could do a console.table. I don't know how that'll work. Let's do console.table. Right? And let's go and log it. So you see, we have each row. This is perfect. This is exactly. So this is exactly what you want to do. So if we were to log this, so at position 0, I have 0, right? So you have each object in here, and each of these objects has different things. This is exactly, this is perfect. So if you go look into here and you look at each item, you'll see that in our first row, so at our board of I, or board of 0, which is our first row, we have an array of all of our different cells. So each one of these is that. So we'll have X is 0, Y is 0, count is 0, is open. All these properties we set, just like that, an object, right? And this represents each grid. And this basically represents the data for our grid. So all basically we're going to end up caring about is everything that's in here, and we're going to represent all of these different cells information by the properties that we have inside of each cell. So we're going to be creating our rows, and then we're going to be creating each cell using this information. Okay? Cool. If that makes sense, cool. We're going to move on to the next step. All right? So we go and we do that and we log our board. So we don't need to do that. I'll just leave it in there for now. All right. So we go and we created our board. Awesome. It makes sense now. Glad to hear it. Okay. So the next thing is let's go ahead and finish creating our board. So the next step, after we've finished creating our board, we have that, we need to go and start adding mines into the board, right? So let's go into here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to start another for loop, okay? So we'll just comment this. After we create the board, we add our mines. Yay! Right? Awesome. So we're going to start a completely new for loop. And since we're using let, we don't have to worry about I being at some weird position or whatever the length of props.rows is. So we're going to use for let I equals 0. I is less than the number of mines. So remember, we pass in this number of mines here. So we gotta see, basically, we go through until we run out of mines to put on the board. And we're gonna go until and we're gonna increment I every time, just like a normal for loop. All right. This React is all just JavaScript. That's why so many people like it. Okay. So we go through, and now what we're going to do is we're gonna select a random row and a random column in our board, right? And a random row, and if you were to define a specific one, we would need to know its X position and our Y position. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use the math.random function that's in JavaScript, okay? So the way that you choose a random number is you just do math.floor, then math.random times the number times the range that you want to choose your number between, and it starts from 0 unless you add 1 at the end. But yeah. So you go through here. So we'll go ahead and we'll start by creating a random row. Oh, not location. Let random row equals, and we're going to say math.floor, and then we're going to do math.random to choose a random number. Returns a pseudo random number between 0 and 1. So if you wanted to extend 1, we just need to multiply it by our range, how far we want to go. So we'll say the number of rows that we have. So we'll say props.rows. And that props.rows is the same rows that we have in that came from our original game. We'll call this our game, okay? Now we have a random row, okay? Now we need to get a random column because we need to choose it. So it's the same thing. So we'll say random column is going to be math.floor, math.random, times the number of columns, right? Cool. Now we have a random row in the random column. So we'll say let cell equals board at our random row and our random column. All right. So now that we have that, let's go in console.log our cell, right? It's going to choose a random cell, and we're going to log it out. So we'll not log our board. So we go through here. Not our one of these, is it? All right, so we go on the board, and so it's not doing anything because it doesn't know how many mines to go through. So let's go ahead and pass in how many mines to go through, because right now it just doesn't do anything because they're like, I don't know what mines is. So let's go and say this.state.mines. We're gonna do like that. Boom. Now you'll see, cannot read property 7 of undefined. Whoa. Cannot read property 7 at undefined. Where at? Create board line 34. Oh, this is because we're still in our oops, that's a mistake. So we're still in our old for loop, so we need to bring this outside of it. That's why that happened. Boom. There. And we'll just reformat it. Boom. All right. So that should fix that problem. There. Now you'll see it chose 10 random cells. We have our X position. It shows our position at X93. Blah, blah, blah. All of this, all of this, all of this. This is fine and dandy. Now we go into here. Now you got to think, what could be a problem that we could run into? A problem that we could run into is that, the cell already has a mine in it. You can't put 2 mines in the cell. It would be a waste of mines. You need a whole bunch of mines to go around, right? So what we're going to do, let's see if we can get a condition where that happens. So let's go and keep on refreshing and see if our X and the Y ever are the same. So, nope. Oh, nope. We'll keep on going because it does happen. I'm waiting. It'll happen eventually. Actually, easier way would just be to keep on doing it, and it will say. So what we're going to do is we're going to say. There's times where when you add say it has you add in a mine, it'll already have a mine. So what we gotta do is make sure that it doesn't have a mine. So we're gonna say if cell doesn't have, if it already has a mine, we gotta make sure that everybody gets, the equal amount of mines until, we run out, then, it's their fault or whatever. So we're gonna say, and we're just going to say go back one. We're like, okay, we're in our loop, we're just gonna go back one. This one already had a mine. We got to go find another random cell. All right? If it has a mine, we're going to say, all right, see ya. Otherwise, we're going to say cell. The cell has a mine. Right? So now we go into here. Cell that has mine equals true. Right? Simple enough. Go through there. Boom. So now, nested block line is redundant. No lone blocks. 38. Oh, I meant to put an else there. Thank you. Boom. Does anybody have any questions about that? Cool. So now that if you go through here and we log our table, we'll go through here and we'll see there'll be, oh, look, at our 9th position in our table, this one has a mine. How about in our 2nd row? No? 3rd row? Oh, there's another mine. 4th row. 5th row. Oh, look, there's another mine. 6th row. Oh, look, that's 2 mines in there. 6, 7. Oh, 8, 9. And there's one more mine in here, 10. All right, and then none of these are going to... All right, I miscounted, so I must have miscounted. Rip. I can't count. I miscounted by 1. So we go through, and now we have a 1 mine in all of our cells. Boom. So now that we have our board, which has all of our mines, none of them have flags, we'll go ahead and we'll just return our board. Am I going to keep making videos like this? Yes. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. All right, so now we have our board. Okay, so now let's go ahead and let's go and create all of our different rows and cells. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to create a row. All right, and what's a row? I mean, what is our row? It doesn't really, our row in our game, if we go look at Minesweeper, a row doesn't really do anything. All it does is just contain all of our cells. So we're just going to go and create something, a row, that's just going to contain all of our cells, right? And it's going to be a simple dumb component that's just a kind of like a placeholder. It's just holding our stuff together. So we're going to go into here, go into new file, in our row, new file, index.js. All right, and we're just going to make a dumb component. All right, so I think it's... Oh, no, that's for Redux. I forget what the snippet is for a stateless component. Oh, yeah, RSC, right? It just imports React and imports a component name. And then we just call it using const in ES6, all right? So we'll say const row, because that's what we're working with, right? And then basically what we're going to do is we're just going to have it, we're going to take in our props from here because we need to know how many rows we have, which is what we're going to pass in from here. And our rows is just going to be equal to how many boards we have, because at the end of the day, our board is just a list of rows, right? A board is just a list of rows, and each row has a whole bunch of different little items. All right, so we'll go into here, and in our row, wherever we are here, let's pass in our props. Boom. So now, after we get our props, we know that the number of cells that we have is going to be each item in our row. So what we're going to do is in our board, now that we have our row here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a row and pass in our rows. So we'll just go in here and we'll go in our board and import our row from / which one is it? What was I working with? Row. Here we go. We got our row. What is this storing there? Import can only be what? Oh, import row from there. All right, so now we have our row. So then we'll go in and we'll go ahead and we'll go and set our information. So we'll go ahead and we'll return. We'll go and based off of the number of rows we have, so in our render function, before we return anything, we're going to say, we're going to go and we're going to create a list of rows. Basically take our data and create a different row for each one. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to say let rows, and you know, this is a good example. So there's, when you want to create a grid, something that you will run into is whether you want to use for loops or you want to use the map function. Now a for loop, when you use nested for loops, those are really good for iterating through data, going through, checking for conditions, doing certain stuff. But the thing is, it has an O of n squared time complexity. So as the size gets bigger, the time it takes for it to run grows quadratically. So it'll keep on going. It'll keep on going really, really fast, right? So you got to choose when one would be better than the other, okay? Now, not only that, but with a for loop, you have to go, not only time complexity you think about, but there's space complexity too. So nested for loops, you have to go and create a new array, which takes up space. If we use map, when we're looping through our rows, that already goes and returns a new list of an array of new cells, all right? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we use our map function here rather than nested for loops, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to do exactly that. We're going to take our rows from our state, and we're going to go and we're going to create our rows and pass that data in to our row component. And we're going to create a whole bunch of our rows. All right, so we're going to say let rows equals this.state.rows, and we're going to map. And then for map, basically the first thing that there is a function. So the first parameter is a function of what it's going to do, and the second one is the index of the function, or blah blah. So that one can have a value, the number, the index that we're at, and an array, and then yeah. So that's all we're going to be working with. So we're going to say for each row, and this is the same thing as writing function row. If you're not familiar with ES6, you could do that. But since we're using ES6, we're going to use our arrow function, and we're going to say row, and then we're going to use that, and we're going to close that, and boom. And now we're going to go and start looping through that, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to have it return a row. So we'll say return, and we're going to go and we're going to use our row here. So we're going to say our row component, right? And what information does our row need to know? Think about it. So a row needs to know the number of cells that it has in it, and that's pretty much it. So we'll say cells, and we'll say cells is going to be each. Well, I guess for each row is going to be here, so we'll say cells, and we'll just say that's our row, because each row contains all of our cells, right? And then when you use a map function, in order for React to keep track of which elements to update in the DOM, it needs to have a key. So this is just something that you keep in mind when using maps in React, right? It needs to keep track of your index, so we'll say we'll pass in a key, and we'll set it equal to the index of where we are when we go through. It's basically like a loop that it runs through, and it goes through that. So we actually need to pass in, get our index in here. So we'll go and we'll get our index. It's not looking like that because it's not in parentheses. Now we have a row and our index, and we pass that in, and we go and we create our rows, and we return a row. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to return that in here. So we'll say, let's give this, so this is our board, so we'll just give it a class name, a board, right? We'll close our good old div buddy here. And we're going to go and we're going to create our rows just like that. Okay. So now in our row if we were to log this, so if we were to console.log our props here, you'll see, am I logging anything else? Doesn't look like it. So let's go into here. You'll see each one of these has a cells array, which is just each item that's in our cell. So we'll say our row is this, right? So if we wanted to be even fancier, we could say actually, does this have an index property? Actually, no, it doesn't. So never mind. So we'll go here. We have our props. Now we have all of our different cells. So what our rows, remember like we said our row's going to do? It's literally just going to be a holder for all of our different cells. So basically we're just going to take that property cells that we have here, and we're going to go and we're going to create a list of cells. And we're going to go and we're going to create a cell component that's going to handle all of this different information and what the UI should update and show when all of this information changes. Okay? So now that we have that, so we go into here and we're going to go and we're going to create our row. Okay? Very simple. We're going to take it and we're going to say let all of the cells in our row. So we're going to say cells. We're going to say props dot cells, and we're just going to use our map function again because we're going to create a whole bunch of our new cells. So we're going to say dot map, and then for each cell is going to have a data, which is the information about the cell, and we need its index, just like we did before. So we'll say data index, and go into here, and then we're going to return a cell, right? Boom. Right, so it needs to know the key. So our key is our index, and it needs our data. Okay, and then once we create our cells, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to, since we're working with our row, we're saying class name equals row. And then we're going to go and work on pass in the cells that we made. Okay, so now this is done. Now we have to go and create our cell component. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's go into here. Let's create a new thing here, index.js. And in here, let's go and import our cell from /cell. Perfect. Now we have our cells, our rows, our cell, and now we need to make another stateless component because our cell is not going to be managing any state, having any lifecycle functions. These are all dumb components, and we have one container or board that's passing this information down. All right, that's a really, really good way to work with React. Okay, so you have our cell, and we have our cell. We're going to be passing in our props, right? And we're going to be doing stuff based off our props. So, what's our cell going to do? So our cell is going to be doing a whole bunch of different stuff based off of our props. So basically, we need to define all of the different ways our cell can look when based off of the different data a certain cell has. So remember, when we go back to our board, if we were to go back and console.log our table again here, here, yeah, console.log our board again, right? We need to know React create element at row. All right, I'll fix that in a second. All right, so we go through, and it needs to know what to do with all of this different data. Okay, so let's go ahead and fix this error. Element type is invalid. Expected a string or a class or a function for composite components but got object. You likely forgot to export your component from the file. So check your row at line 49. Let's see. What? What? What's it talking about? What you talking about, Willis? Huh? Check the render method of row. What you talking about, homie? What? Whoa. This is a weird bug. Let's see. We go through. We expected a string but got an object. Where did it expect a string and get an object? Let's see. Check the render method of row. Bugs like this are always going to run into here. So let's see. Where do we do that? React to create element in our row. Div at 55. We pass in. Yep. Minesweeper, we pass in our rows. The columns. Mines. Right. Go into here. Go into our board. To here. Say this, let's say that rows. Go through here. We pass in that rows. And in our, oh. Yeah, I forgot to save my cell. What a what an awkward mistake. Okay, cool. I forgot to save my cell. So I was trying to access it and they were like, what the hell is cell? We don't know what that is. Okay, that was weird. Cool. So everybody makes mistakes, right? So we go through, we have our board. Now, what we have to do is we have to go and say what our cell's going to look like, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a function, right? And our function is basically going to say what our cell is going to look like. So we're going to say, you know, if it's open, it looks like this. If it has a mine, it looks like this. Otherwise, you know, does it have mines near it? Do this. Otherwise, if it has a flag, blah, 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 all those different conditions. But right now, all we're going to worry about if it's open or not, right? So we're going to say let cell, and we're just going to create a function for this. There's a whole bunch of different ways you could do this. But for right now, the easiest way would just be create a function and then just to call that function in our render. Okay? So we're going to say we'll just call this render cell. Render cell. So now that we have in our render cell, we're going to be working with a whole bunch of different information. So if our props, so now if we were to go through our thing and we were to log our props.data, let's go ahead and do that. Console.log. And this is going to log a lot of stuff because basically it's going to log 100 times because it goes through and it renders every single cell, right? All of our cells, whether they have a mine or not, blah, 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 all this stuff, okay? So each props.data is going to represent each cell. So we go through, and their cell will say if the cell that we're at, so props.data, so if the data of the cell, if it's open, then we're going to do some stuff. Otherwise, we're going to do some other stuff. We'll say do some stuff. Otherwise, do some other stuff, right? So if it's open, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to say return, and we're going to create a div for our cell. So we'll say div.cell.open. This is using emit. So when I hit tab, it'll do div class name equals cell space open, just like that. Boom. If it's, you know, if our cell is open, then the UI should render up a cell that opens. Okay? And yeah, that's all that's going to do for now. Otherwise, we got to say it's closed. So we'll say div return div dot cell. Just like that. Cell. Please. VS Code. Don't do this to me. Boom. Right? This is what it's going to do. And then based off of that, instead of returning a function, it's just going to return whatever this function render cell returns. So we're just going to call render cell. Boop. And that's what our cell is going to render. Okay? Awesome. So now that we have that, let's go into our game. Not that. That's the finished product. And let's look at what the DOM looks like. Because we went through and we basically made our whole elements, all of our elements in our board in concept. So if we did this right, we should have a Minesweeper object, which is our board, remember? VS Code. We have a Minesweeper div, right? And then we should have all of our rows, and then we should have all of our cells. And none of them should be open because we set them all to false when we created our board, right? So let's go and look. Boom. So we have our board. We have, look at that, 10 rows. And in each row, look at that, 10 cells. Our logic is clear. It's very strict. Good. Awesome. Now we have our board. And then now let's go in here and let's start defining our styles. That way, we can kind of get some, actual validation that this is actually working, because right now we're just looking at a blank template, right? So we go into here and we go into here, and let's go and add some CSS into here, make it look pretty, All right. Cool. So let's see. So how do we want to do this? So our Minesweeper is going to be 500 by 500. Our board is 500 by 500. But our whole game is we didn't even do the board head yet. This is just the board. So let's worry about just the board. All right, so we're going to go in here and let's worry about just our board. All right. So actually, we're going to end up having another board, another item in here, like our board head. So let's actually make this height 600, and we'll leave some room in there for a board head eventually. Okay, so we have our board. What we're going to do is we're going to say the width of our board is 500 pixels. The height of our board is 500 pixels, right? And we'll give it a border, 1 pixel solid, black. Bada bing, bada boom. Okay. Boom. So let me put this side by side so we can see it. We'll close out that. We'll go back to here. All right, cool. So now you see we have our board, and our board's inside of our Minesweeper game, right? We should also actually go ahead and create our board head just purely for aesthetic reasons so we can see everything. So let's go and let's create our board head, right? And what's our board head going to have? It's going to have the timer, and it's going to have the number of flags that's there, the number of flags that are left, and it's going to have the reset button. All right, so let's go ahead and create that board head. So new file, index.js, bada bing, bada boom, right? And our board head is just going to be another stateless component, because all it cares about is the information that's being passed to it. It doesn't have any lifecycle methods, and it doesn't care about lifecycle methods, and it doesn't care about maintaining its own state. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our board head. All right, and just like all of our other stateless components, we're going to pass in our props. I just wanted to say, if you guys have any questions, on anything that I'm doing here, make sure you leave it in the comments below. I'm trying to do this for you guys, okay? Opinion on the coding phase versus clever programmer beef. I don't like being part of all that stuff, Drama is drama. I'd rather just stick to doing my own thing. So I'd like to just personally stay out of that. I don't know. I'm not going to make a comment on it. There's no real reason to, right? All right. So yeah, that's kind of my stance on the matter. I don't want to be a part of it because, yeah. If somebody wants to sell a course, they should be able to sell a course. And, you know, if it's good and it actually helps people, then, you know, whatever. Anyways, so we'll go through our board head, and we'll create our board head. And in our board head, what's our board head gonna? So our board head's gonna have the timer. We could have the timer, the number of flags, and the reset button. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's add in our time. Right. So our time in here. So we have to go and we'll say our time is 0. Right. The time is going to be 0. We already have our number of flags, so we need to go and pass that into here. So we'll say time is 0. Boom. So now when we pass in our props, it'll know what time it is we're working with. So now what we're going to do is we're basically just going to do, just like in here, you have your minutes and you have your seconds, right? So let's go and create a variable for our minutes. So let's say our minutes is equal to, now the minutes is going to be, since we're going to be counting in seconds, it's going to be whatever time that we're at divided by 60. And to make sure that we get a nice rounded number, we're going to use the math.floor function, which basically rounds it down to the nearest integer. All right, so math.floor. Yep. And then we're going to say props.time, because that's the time we're at currently, and divide by 60. All right, and that's going to be the numbers of minutes we're at. All right, now we need to go and we need to take our seconds. So we'll say let our seconds equal our time, so the time that we're at, props.time, minus our minutes times 60, right? Because our minutes is the number of minutes. So if we are past 1, that's 60 seconds that we got to add into our seconds, all right? And if it's not, if props.time hasn't started, or if it's not set at all, we're going to set it to 0, okay? That's what that means. So we'll do props.time is equal to our seconds is equal to our time in seconds minus our minutes times 60, all right? Our total seconds. Or otherwise it's 0. So then now that we've done that, let's go ahead and let's format our seconds so we can get that, you know, the :00, just like a normal time clock would work, right? You have your minutes and your time, all right? So we'll say let formatted seconds equal, and then what we're going to use is a ternary operator. So you can use if statements, else statements, but if you want to do it all in one line, you could use ternary operators, right? Which basically allows you to do conditionals all in one line. So we're going to say formatted seconds equals our seconds if our seconds is less than 10, right? So if our seconds is less than 10, which means it doesn't have a second number before it, then we have to put the 0 in front of it. Otherwise, we just leave it as normal. And we got to do, and yeah, so we'll go into here. So we'll say if it's less than 10, question mark, and that's basically going to be our first block. And we're going to use string template literals in ES6. We'll go into here, and that's how you do a template literal, okay? So we're going to put a 0 in front of it, and then we're going to say, we're going to pass in our seconds, right? Boom. Otherwise, if it's not, we're just going to return it as it is, right? This would be the same. This would be the same as if we said if our seconds is less than 10, let formatted seconds equal that. And then we have else. Oh my gosh. Else, we're going to say return that. But the thing is that when you use an if statement, it only runs once, and we want it to check every time it re-renders. So we'll just use a ternary operator like this. So now that we have that, we have our time. So now we'll go and create our variable, which is the timer at. We'll say let time equal, what time are we at? So our time is going to be using string temple literals again. It's just going to be, you know, the minutes, right? Colon, and then our formatted seconds. Cool? And that's the timer at. Right? So now when we go and we create our board head, so since we're at a board head, and let's go and say class name equals board head. Board head. Now we have that in here. And now let's go and let's just drop in our timer. So we'll say div dot timer, right? And we'll pass in our time. Right? Simple enough. So let's go make sure that shows up in our board head. So what we're going to do is in our Minesweeper game, before our board, right? So before our board, in here, we're going to have this head thing. All right, so let's go in here and we're going to import our board head. So we're going to say import board head from ./component/ board head. Boom. And now we're going to go and we're going to add in our board head. And what does our board head care about? It cares about how many flags are left, right? I can never find the window. Okay, it cares about the timer at, or the timer at, how many flags have been opened, and whether or not we've won or lost, right? So since we haven't gotten that far, we're just going to pass in our time. Time is equal to this dot state dot time. We have, and we need to pass in our flags. So we'll say flags equals this, or we'll call it flag count because that's what it is. It's the count of number of flags. Flag count this dot state dot flags. Boom. So now we have that. We render our board head, and we go and we'll render our time. Does it do it correctly? Yeah, look at that. Boom, our time is right there. So what's the next thing? So we need to go and have it show how many flags are there. So we'll go. We don't need to format anything. It's just literally going to be how many flags are there. So we're going to say div. We're going to go and create a div for our flags. Flag count. And we'll go in here and we'll say pass in from our props. So props dot flag count, right? Because that's what we called it in our Minesweeper, right? Flag count. Yep. Flag count. Boom. So does that show up there now? Cool. So now we have our flag count, and we have our flag count, we have our timer, and now the last thing we need is a reset button. So let's go in there and just throw in a button, and we'll call it, give the class name a reset, because that's what it does. All right. And now we have a reset button, and this is going to say, you know, reset for now. All right, so now we have our board head. So it's going to be this, this, and that. Cool. So now let's go ahead and let's style our board head. Okay? So our board head, let's see, what can we do to our board head if we were to do this? All right, so let's see, board head. Well, our board head is going to be 100 pixels, right? So we'll say, or how big should it be? We'll say 100. We'll say, well, first off, we'll make it display flex. That way it puts everything in one line, right? We'll do display flex. Flex direction row. I hope all my Flexbox homies are out there. Hell yeah. So we got that. So now they're all right next to each other. So now we'll set the height of it. So let's just make it like 50 pixels. All right. I'll just pass in the styles in here because this is pretty straightforward. Basically, we're going to space it out in between. So we'll say justify content, space between. Boom. Now I'll put equal space between each element in the row. And yeah, I think now we need to say all of these. So we need our reset button. So reset. I'm just going to go ahead and copy these styles from my basic stuff because all of this is just going to be the same. All right. Reset, flag timer. Boom. And this button is redonkulously big. Okay. Awesome. Oh, and let's center it too, right? While we're here, inside of here. Boom. Now, why is this button so big? All right, so we're just gonna take this part out. Nice. And also, we need a title, right? Hey, Minesweeper. So where are we in our board head? I'm just gonna board head. Let's just go throw in a title. Let's go div dot. We'll just throw an H1 in here. We'll say, hey, what's up, YouTube? Or we'll just call it Minesweeper YouTube. let's not be dumb. All right, Minesweeper YouTube. Okay. Sounds good. Actually, let's not even put this in here because it doesn't care about that. And we'll just go ahead and in our Minesweeper here, I'll just put it above it. There. Boom. Look at that. Now, let's just go in here, and I'm just gonna actually just take my styles that I had before, and I'm just gonna put it in here. All right. See, save us some time dealing with all this stuff. So this is just my styles from my actual project, right? Boom. So I just put in the styles. So I added in the formatting, I added in a hover thing, right? Cool. Now we've got all that. But our reset button is like redonkulously big. So let's go and change that. Reset. We'll just comment that out. Boom. Okay? Awesome. Now we have our board. Cool. Also, I'm going to change the font of our whole Minesweeper project. All right. So we'll just say board. We'll say font.family Helvetica. No? You don't like that? Where is this? Here, I'll put it here. Whoa. Font-family Helvetica. Why are you not doing nothing? You're not changing. Whatever. Cool. So now we have that. Awesome. Clever programmer be charging $400,000 to do courses, man. Coding phase, so that's a waste of when you learn for cheap. All right. I'm gonna stay out of that. Okay, cool. So now we have created our Minesweeper game. So now that we've done that, the next thing we have to do is we gotta change how our cell looks when we click on it. We got to add in our open, and we got to add in our flags, and we need to start our timer. We got to add in all of our functionality. We've created our board, we've created our head, and we added in our reset button. Now we need to get into the actual functionality of Minesweeper. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an open function. Okay, so let's go into here. Where are we going to create our open function? Let's create it in our board because it wouldn't make sense if we put it out here in our game. Because we're going to be working with the data that's in our cells. So we need to, where are we passing that information from? We're passing it from our board. Okay? So we're going to go and we're going to create an open function. So after our create board here, we're going to say open equals, and we're just going to say open is we're going to pass in the cell that we're working with, right? Awesome. Does anybody have any questions so far? Is everybody cool? Let me know. Okay. Also, we should probably track the status of where we are in our game, right? You know, if we won, we won. Whether the game is running or we're waiting for them to restart, right? So let's go and add that in. So we'll say, what do we want to call this? Status. And we'll say, we'll just make it, it starts off as, what should the game start off as? It should start off as just running, right? Our game is running. We're not waiting. We're just waiting for them to click on the item on the board, and then we're going to start going. Okay? So what we're going to do, excuse me. Nobody goes? Okay, cool. What we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to get. So what's the logic for our open cell? So when we open a cell, it either needs to, show how many cells, how many mines are near it, or if you click on a bomb, it should re-render. Or because you shouldn't have to be able to be, it wouldn't be fun if you clicked on a bomb and it automatically opened it. Right? So you got to think about all that stuff. So what does our open method do? So let's write that out. All right? And I actually wrote this out before we got onto here, so let me go and pull that up. Awesome. Right? So let's think. So we have, when we open our function, if we click on a cell and it has a mine, you lose, right? If you click on a square and it's not a mine, if we click on a cell and it doesn't have a mine, you open it. And you open it. Two things can happen when that happens, right? Two things can happen. It can either, if a square adjacent to it, like next to it, has a mine, then it's going to show total number of mines. If no adjacent cells have a mine, then we unhide it and open all cells next to it and check for information, right? And that's basically all of our left click logic. Also, if we click on the mine on our first turn, it should reset the board, because it wouldn't be fun if we clicked on that. That wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be fair. You just immediately lose. That'd be the worst feeling ever. So if we click on the mine on our first turn, we'll just say reset the board and try again. All right? Cool. So go into here. And go into our board. We're going to work on our cell. So basically, what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to get. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to get our rows. So we're going to say let our rows equal to this, that state, that rows, right? And then we're going to get the current. we're going to get the current cell that we're getting. We're getting the cell that we clicked on, right? And what does the cell have to describe it? We have our X and Y like we had before. So if we wanted to get that or get the cell we're working at, so we'll get our current cell. So we'll let current, and we're going to go in our rows or our board, and we're going to say we're going to get its position in the row, which is our Y position, and then its position in the column, which is our X position. Cell.x. Boom. All right. Now, what's the first thing we have to check for again, right? So when we first open our cell in the whole game, we need to check if that cell already has a mine in it, right? Just like we defined here. If we click on a mine on our first term, we got to reset the board and try again, because that wouldn't be fair. So we're going to do exactly that. So we're going to say if our current cell that we're at, if it has a mine, and the number of open cells that we have is equal to 0. So where are we going to pass in the number of open cells? So we probably should track that in our board. So how are we going to track that? So we could just simply create something called open cells and just track how many cells have been opened. And then based off of that, we go and we check that for that condition. So we're going to just add in something called open cells, and we're going to start it off as 0, right? Right, and then we go into here. So then our board needs to know about how many cells are open. So we're going to say open cells is going to be equal to this state open cells. All right, and let's just reformat this. Boom. All right, so we go into here. Our board needs our open function. So number of cells is 0. So when we first start, this props open cells equals 0. So if the current cell has a mine and we're on the first cell, we're clicking on it for the first time, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. We're going to go and we're going to say, if it has a mine, we're going to completely reset the board. No, they can't have a mine on the first click. That's not fair. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to console.log cell already has mine. Restart. All right, so we'll go into our cell. Restart in here, and then we're going to go and we're going to create a new set of rows. So we're going to say let our new rows is equal to, we're going to go and call our create board function again. We're just going to create a completely new set of rows. Create board based off of the props that we have. And our props is just the information that we have when we first start, right? Because that's what the create board function takes in. It takes in our props. We pass in our props, and then what we're going to do is we're going to reset our rows to these new rows that we've created. So we're going to say this set state and then we're going to say rows is going to be set to our new rows. Boom. And then once we've done that, after we've reset our rows, we should open the cell that we're at. So, and that's the cell that we passed into our open function. So when we click on it here in our cell, we're going to be referring to the cell that we're at. Okay. So let's go into here. So we'll say here, and it's basically going to recall itself, this function. So we're going to say, go into here, and the set state, if you didn't know, has a second parameter, which is a function, which is a callback, so that when their state is done updating, it will run this function, okay? So we go into here, and we'll say this dot open, call itself, and we got to pass in our cell here, so cell, okay? Boom. And that's what we're going to do if it already has a mine. So if it already has a mine in it, reset the board, open it, and then check it again. And it's going to keep on doing it until you get a chance. Now, the chances of that happening when you have such a small board is very unlikely. If there were more mines on the board, obviously that could happen. So yeah, so what we're going to do, otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to start checking for different stuff. So what are the different states that a cell could have? Let's see. You have a cell could have a flag on it. A cell could be open. And a cell could have a mine. And yeah, that's it. It has a flag on it. It could be open or it has a mine. All right? So if it doesn't have a flag and it's not already open, then we should open it, right? And we should say, hey, we opened the cell. Okay? So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say if our cell, so if our cell doesn't have a flag, right? Has flag, just like our create board function said. If it doesn't have a flag, and we're going to say if the current cell that we're working with isn't open, right? You go into here, and then what we're going to do is we got to create some function that's going to open our cell. Okay? So let's go ahead, and basically what that's going to do is it's just going to increment the amount of open cells that are open. That's pretty much all it's going to do. So let's go and create a function that's going to do that. All right? So let's call it, let's call it open cells, right? No, I use open cells, so you get confusing. What's a good name for it? I'll just, a good way, if you don't know what to call it off the top of your thing, a good way is just to call your functions based off of what it does. So this function is going to handle when cells are clicked on. So we'll call the function handle cell click. Okay? So we'll say handle cell click. All right, we handle our cell click, and then we're going to do some stuff. So what do we check for? Right? So what are we going to do when somebody clicks on the cell? So let's think about it. So when the number of open cells is equal to 0, so basically if the game hasn't started yet, we got to start the game. So our game shouldn't start off as running. It should be started off as waiting. And this can be either waiting, running, or ended. Because you're either waiting for the game to start, the game is running, or you lost, or you won. All right? And we got to represent those three different, different statuses of the game, right? Okay? So when we first click on it, so if no cells are open, right? And the game isn't running. No, actually, and if the game isn't running, then we're going to go and say, start the game, right? We're going to switch our state to this running. We're going to set it to running, literally, okay? So that's exactly what we're going to do. So you say, if this.state.open cells is equal to 0, right? And our game, we're not running, so our status, so we'll say this.state.status is not set to running, because that's one of the three things that it can be. We're going to go ahead and we're going to set our state. And we're going to say our status, hey, we're starting the game. Set state. And we're going to say a status. We are operation a go. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to need to probably start the timer, right? So a timer is that it's going to, tick based off of every amount of time, every second. It's going to increment our time by 1 second. All right. So we're going to create two functions. We're going to create a function that ticks, that literally ticks every time, every time a second goes by, add 1. And then we need to create a set interval function that's going to go ahead and create a set interval for us to start incrementing our time. Okay? So let's go ahead and start off by creating our tick function. So we'll say tick. So each tick of our seconds So we'll start off here. And what do we want? What do we care about? So as long as the game is running, we should be ticking, right? So we're going to say if if the number of cells is greater than 0, the number of open cells, so this.state.open cells is greater than 0, and our game is running. This.state.status equals running. There. Then we're going to take our time and we're going to increment it by 1. So we're going to say let time equals this.state.time plus 1. And then you can say this.setState time, right? And this is using computed properties since there's already a property called time in here. When we create a variable called time, you don't need to put time is time. In ES6, it'll know that you're talking about a key and a value that are both called time. Okay? And that's all tick is going to do. It literally just adds 1 to our time. Okay? Cool? So then now we need to go and create our set interval function. Does anybody have any questions so far? Nope? Okay, cool. So we go into here and we're going to create our set interval function. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So our set interval is literally just going to be a wrapper for JavaScript set interval function. So we call it set interval equals what is set interval? It takes in the function and the amount of time it takes to run it. So we'll just pass it a function, or I can't use function. I'll just call it fn and time, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this state variable, we'll add in their intervals because we're going to need to clear it every time we do this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say this.intervals, and we're going to push in we're going to push in the interval. So we're going to call set interval that JavaScript has. We're going to pass in our function that whatever we call and our time. Right? So we go into here. So then in our tick function, we set state for our time. So now what we want to do is we want to, in our handle cell click, when we click on a cell, we want to set an interval and then we're going to tick. So where is my handle cell click? When we're here, after we've set it to running, using the callback and set state again, we're going to say this dot set interval, and we're going to pass in our function. So this dot tick and 1,000 our time in milliseconds. So 1,000 milliseconds. So every time we click on a cell, we go through and we need to say add our time by 1. Right? Boom. And that's what we're going to do. So now in our board, when we click, we're going to pass in this function handle cell click in here, and we're going to pass it into our board. Now there's probably like more efficient ways to do this, but I'm trying to just kind of get through this for right now. So we're going to pass in open cell click into our board. So we're going to say this dot open cell click. Boom. So now that we got this, now we go into here. Now in our here, we're going to say this dot props open cell click, because that's the function. Just like that. Right? So we're going to call open cell click. Right? And then after we've clicked on the cell, we have to say, hey, we clicked on the cell. It should be open now. So we'll say the current cell that we're working at is open. Right? And we need to be able to find the number of mines that it has into it, right? Because when you click on a cell, it should tell you, if it doesn't have anything in it, well, it should tell you the number of mines that are adjacent to it, okay? So we're going to say current.isOpen is set to true, okay? And then what we're going to do is we need to figure out a way to count the number of mines that are around it. Okay? So let's go ahead and we create a function that finds how many mines are in proximity to it. Okay? So let's go and do that. It is hot in my house, yo. Also, I'm putting on some music because it is so quiet. No. I need something hype. Give me something hype. No, not this. Good vibes. What is this? Alright, perfect. Okay. So now, we're going to go into our find mines. We're going to go find mines. Our cell. Let's create a function. So now, okay, so let's think about this because this function is kind of tricky, right? So let's go and let's create a new drawing, right? We still had our old table from before. Let's go, don't save. All right. So we have so if we were to look at our grid, right? Actually, this right? This is our project. If we were to look at this, right? Let's think about it, right? If we want to find a cell that's near it, that's literally the 8 cells that surround it, right? So here, and excluding this cell. So do any of these have mines? If so, we need to say add to it, right? So we go through, same for the cell, you just check around it, just like that. All right, that's what this find mines function will doing. All right, but there's edge cases, right? So let's say we're checking this corner, right? We need to, there's no cells over here and over here. So we shouldn't try to check it because when we do that, we'll get this sort of like weird reference error, right? So when we do that, if we're at the edge, we should skip it. If it's past the edge, we should say don't check that because it's going to return a reference error. So skip it. All right? And that's the only thing that we're going to check for. So let's go through it, and we're going to walk through this complicated function step by step. All right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just create this variable that says mines in proximity. And this mines in proximity is just going to increment whenever it finds a cell that has mine that's set to true. So what we're going to do is we're going to say let mines in proximity equal to 0. All right, we're going to set that equal to 0 because we start off having no mines. So now, if we want to go through all of this, we have to go from the position before. We had to check the position before it. So let's say we're working at this cell, right? Actually, let me draw this out, right? Let's draw out this. We have a big right? You have this, and you have 3 rows and 3 columns, right? Based off of the cell we're at, we have our X and our Y position already of the cell that we're at. So basically, we want to go check from here to here and check all the way from here, and here to here, right? We got to go and we got to check that. So this is going to be 3. So if we want to think about it, we want to go to the cell, the row, or the column previous to it, to the column at the end, and same for the row. So this would be -1, 0. If we want to think of it in terms of indexes, -1, 0, 1. And the same way here, this is going to be -1, 0, and 1th position. Okay? And we're going to go and we're going to loop through it at each specific item. We're going to skip over it if we're at our cell that we are at, and each of these, just like that. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. So let's go start off, and it's going to be very similar to how we create our board because we're going to be going through it. So we're going to say for, and we're just going to to be really specific so we don't get confused, we're not going to use I and J like we used our current board. We're just going to use row and column because it got really complex when I was coding this out before. So we say let row equals, so the position, so the position we're at, so let row is -1, right? Position here before, so -1. And then we're going to go until we hit the cell, the position, the column after it. All right? So we're going to say row is -1. Row is less than equal to 1. Oop. Less than equal to 1. Then row plus plus. I forgot a semicolon here. All right? And we're going to go through here. So similar to this, our board, where we go, there are rows and our columns, we're going to do the same exact concept. But we're, instead of going through our whole board, we're going through all the cells around it. I know I keep saying that, but it's really important. This was something that confused me when I first started it. So you go, and now you're going to go through all of your columns. So you're going to say let column equals -1. Column is less than equal to 1. Same thing with our column. All right, and now we need to start checking, right? So if we have to, so basically now we have to check to see if we're at an edge, right? Because we're in here. Because if we're at an edge, we shouldn't do anything. We should just not do anything. All right. So let's say if the cell's position plus the index we're at is greater than equal to 0, cell.y, our row position, plus our row is greater than equal to 0, right? And our cell.x position, our column position is greater than equal to 0, then we should be able to go on. Otherwise, we shouldn't do anything. You should just not do this, because think about it. We have, if the cell.y position, if we're checking like over here, this is going to be negative. And the same thing for if we're checking our columns. If it's negative here, then it's not in range. So we only want to check for if it's positive. Okay? Now that we know that, we need to make sure that this is a valid cell in our board, right? Because this could get really wonky. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if, the same thing, we're going to check. We're going to make sure that this cell is inside of our board. So cell.y plus row is less than this.state. The number of rows that we have is less than this.state.rows.length. All right? So we go into here, and our x position, cell.x plus our column is less than the number, the column length, which is, or the column length, which is like that, the number of cells in here. So we're making sure that we're working within a proper row and a proper column item. Okay. This.state.rows0.length, because the 0 represents the row that we're at. Okay. So now we do that. Now if we check that, the last thing we need to check for is if the cell has a mine or not, right? And we're not in the edge. Okay, so then we're going to say if so many conditions, right? Oh, this should be and. There we go. What is this? Okay, it's just saying I should. So then, the last thing we got to do is start another if statement. Oh, why is this doing that? Okay. So if, the last thing we're checking for is if this.state.rows, the cell.y, if the cell that we're looking at, cell.y plus row, which is cell.y, cell.x plus column, same thing as before, the cell that we're looking at, if it has a mine, if it has a mine and we're not, our row and our column is not at an edge, because this would be our row is equal to 0, and this would be our column is equal to 0, right? So you have to check for if it has a mine. And I just like doing it like this because it'll get confusing otherwise. So I write this like this. And we'll say, and we're not row, and we're not at our row equals 0 and our column equals 0. I forgot the and. Right? Then, and only then, we should add the mines. We count the mines. Mines in proximity. Plus. Or you can do +1. Whatever floats your boat, right? And that's that. It'll find the mines, and then once it increments it by 1, it'll go through and it'll go on to the next cell, and to the next cell in this 3x3 grid. Here, 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 here. Okay? And then at the end of it, after we find all of our mines, we just gotta return it. Mines in proximity. Next time I do something like this, I think I'm gonna just, I don't know if live streaming it is the best idea. Guys, can you let me know in the comments if you like it that I'm like live streaming it as I'm thinking through it, or if you'd prefer a video where I split it up into sections and kind of like break it down and go over each chunk of code. All right? Because right now I'm just kind of going through my thought process of making this game. Okay? Let me know in the comments. Cool. So now we've found all of our mines, and let's go and now that we've found our mines, let's go and count our mines. So let's go and do that. So let's see. That would go in our open function. Right? So let's say, actually let's just do this dot set state. Let's go and we set our rows to our new information. And now we know if this, all right? Cool. So now let's go and see what happens. Let's pass in our open function into our cells. So we'll say open is equal to this dot open. And let's go pass it into our row. Open is equal to props dot open. And then in our cell, we're going to add in on click equals props dot open. And we got to pass in our data. So this is going to be like this. Props dot open, and we're going to pass in our data. We pass in just like this. So we're just going to put that in the other one as well. And here. Just like that. And now let's go test it. So you click it. Props that on cell click is not a function. She's super freaky. Oh, I called it wrong. So open cell click. What do you mean it's not a function? In our Minesweeper.js. Oh, yeah. There we go. That's why. Oh, I never set my this.intervals to be. We'll just go ahead and we'll say. We'll just say this.intervals equals an empty array. All right, go in here. I can't do that here. I need to do it inside of a constructor. There. Oh, I forgot my super. Excuse me. There. So now it's open, right? We click on the cell, it opens. Cool. And that should be able to run, that should do the, yeah, so that's the basics of it. You click on a cell, now it's open and you can't do anything to it. You click on it, it's open. It's open. So now if I click on this, and then my open function, where are we? In our board, in our open function, if after we click on it, console.log this.state.rows, click on that, when we log this, you'll see that our first cell is now open. Okay? Cool. Okay, cool. So now that we have that, I'm definitely going to stream this next time, or split this up into a video next time. Where are we? Okay, so now I'm now I'm lost. So we just created our open function and we went through and we got that. So now we need to get the number of mines, pass in that number of mines and set our count to that. The number of mines near it. And we're going to use that count inside of our cell. All right? So we're going to go and click do that. So we're going to say call. We're going to go and we're going to call our find mines. Now, a problem that I ran into when I ran this initially was that it takes a while for it to go through and find all of the different cells around it. So when going through the board, where is it? So set state, React set state is synchronous by nature, unless you use the callback function. So if you don't wait until it finds all of the mines, then you're going to run into a problem. So like you click this, it takes time for it to go through and find the mines near it, find mines near that, find mines near that, find mines, etc., etc., same. So what you need to do is you need to go through and we need to create basically a promise that says, go and do this, and then when you're done, then we go and do that. So let's go and modify our code to do that. All right? So in our open, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a function that's called let async, like let's call it asynchronous count mines, because that's what it's going to do. We're going to count our mines and then do this. So let async count mines equals a new promise. And if you don't know what promise is, so promise is a feature that came into ES7. Basically, if you've worked with AJAX calls, you know how you make your AJAX request and then you have a then call. It's the same concept. You have your promise takes in two parameters. You have a resolve and a reject, which are both functions. Reject is called when the promise fails, and resolve is called when the promise is successful and it does everything that it needs to and there's no errors, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to use our resolve because it's probably not going to fail, and we're just going to say, so we're just going to pass in resolve, and it's a function. So it would be the same, just like before. It would be the same as writing function resolve, and you do that. But since we're trying to use ES6 for everything, we're going to use resolve arrow function, and then we're going to do what we're going to find. So we're going to go and we're going to find all of our mines. So we're going to say let mines equals to this dot find mines, and we're going to pass in the cell. We're going to find the cells in that cell. Boom. And then when we're done, this mines is resolved and it calculates that mines. We're going to resolve, and we're like, okay, we got the mines. Let's do this. Let's party. All right. So let's actually call this before we even determine our rows. So let's do it here, right in the beginning. We're going to find the number of mines. We find the mines, and then we resolve, and we pass in the value that the promise returns. So when you make an AJAX call, it usually sends back a JSON with all of your data. So with this, our promise is going to resolve our mines. Boom. So we resolve our mines. So now we just call this async count mines and we say then. So we say get our mines. Then when we're done, then we're when we're done with it, we're going to have the number of mines. So we'll just say number of mines. We've gotten our number of mines, and now we have the number of mines this cell has. So if I was to console.log this, console.log number of mines, and we're gonna put all the rest of our stuff inside of this function. So this let rows here, all of this stuff. So all of this stuff. So I forgot a curly brace. So we're gonna take all of this stuff and we're gonna put it in here, right? So now we go and we click on it, and now let's go and check. Number of mines is not defined. It's right there. What are you talking about, homie? What? Oh, didn't capitalize that. Okay. So now, if we go and we click on this, if we go and click on this, I also am going to remove the old console.log that I had, so this doesn't get confusing. Right? You click. Where is this coming from? Oh, it's in our create port function. What do you know? Over here. There. When the girls stop. All right. So you click a cell. This has 0 cells in. Still 0 cells nearby. How many mines are nearby it? This one has 1 mine nearby it. It has 1 mine nearby it. How about this one? This one has 1 mine nearby it. You see? And this is what that is. Okay? This will just count the number of mines that are near. Run this find mines function, and then when it's done, we pass in that number of mines into our function. Which theme is that? That's actually a good question. Let me see. View. Gosh, how do you check that? Preferences, color theme. I think I'm using Dracula. I'm using the Dracula theme. This is just the one that I'm personally a fan of, but yeah. So we do this. So we find our mines, blah, blah, we count our mines. Now we have the number of mines nearby it. So we need to set the count of our cell to have that number of mines. Right? So we open up our cell and we say our cell, the current, the number of mines nearby it, our count, is equal to number of mines. Number of mines. Right? Boom. Just like that. So now, every time we click on a cell, that cell's current count is going to be incremented is going to be set to whatever the count is. So now if I was to go and console.log this.state.rows after we've done this. So you go and log. Let me start. I click the top left one, right? So this is the first array at our first item. So this one has 0. Okay. We'll do this one. In our third row at the second one, all these are still 0. Oh no, the first row, clone for or just let me log current. That'd probably be a better log. All right, log that, and you see at position 3, at position 3, our index 3, and our y is equal to 0 based on the 0 based index. our count, there's one mine nearby it. And same here. If we go here, there's no mines in that one. How about this one? No mines in that one. Nearby that one. There's one nearby that one. Oh, there's 2 mines nearby that one. And so on and so forth. And that'll change based off of how many mines we set in our board. Okay? Which theme and which font? The font that I'm using, that's actually, I'm using Fira Code. So I like Fira Code because it has these things called font ligatures, which basically allows you, when you write, like a equal sign, and like for an arrow function, if you do equal sign and greater than, it turns it into like an arrow. Or if you do less than or equals to or greater than or equal to, it'll turn it into like literally less than or equal to. And greater than equal to will turn into that. And then when you have equal signs, you have equal signs, and you have double equal signs, which literally puts 2 lines, and then triple equal signs. And then when you do not equal to, you can do not equal to for just, comparing the value, and then double not equal to, which compares value and type. So I just think it looks a lot of sense because it reminds me back of when I was back in like elementary school and we used these. And I don't know, it's easier for me to read, and anything that just makes it easier to read when I'm going through all that stuff is just really nice. Yeah. Awesome. So now, let's see. So now we've calculated, we've set the count, and we've set our current. So now we need to go and update, or have our cell update and change based off of our count, right? So let's go and do that. So now, if the cell is open, right, it's going to do that. And then the next thing we want to check for, so we're gonna say if it's open and it has a mine, because it can open and it has a mine, we're gonna say props.data.has mine. Actually, we're not gonna worry about the mine. We haven't gotten that far yet. So we're gonna say if props.data.count is equal to 0. If it's 0, then we're gonna, whoa. Oh, okay. I was like, did I not copy it? We're going to we're gonna say it's open. Oh, that was it, actually. Never mind. So you go and we're going to put in a normal cell with no count. Actually, no, we should put it in our count. All right, and then no, it's not. Yeah, if the count is 0, right? If in Minesweeper, let's look at the game in Minesweeper. If it's 0, it shows nothing. So we're not going to put anything inside of it. It's just going to be an empty div, just like that. Now, if it's open, then another condition is if it has a mine, right? So else if props.data has mine, right? If it has a mine, then we're going to return that. This is going to be open, and we're going to just put in m in here just for mine. Otherwise, then our count is not equal to 0 and it doesn't have a mine. So it can either have a mine or it can have a flag too. So we'll worry about the flags when we get over to flags. So you have our mines. Otherwise, we're just going to, ooh, that's not the right one. Else, we're going to return just a cell that's open with our props.data.count, right? And that should do that. And that's what that's all going to look like, right? So you go into here. Now, when you click on the cell, let's find a cell that has it. It'll put a 2, right? There's 2 mines near this one, right? That's exactly what we want. Oh, there's one by it. Oh, 0 in that one. 1 in that one. So that logic is working. For how long have I been coding? So I've been coding for a while. I've been coding since I was, honestly, I went to a coding camp when I was younger. I actually have a video, I'll link it, that kind of talks about my story. I've been coding since I was like 9, but I didn't like take it seriously. I like played around with like web development and stuff. Let me see if I can find the video for you because it's actually a nice story. I do that here. I've been coding for a while. So that's the video of how I kind of got into coding, how long I've been coding, my whole backstory. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out that video. Okay? So now that we've done that, we go, and now we have our count showed. So perfect. Everything is going just the way it's supposed to. So now, what's the next step? So the next thing we need to do is we need to, if it's 0, and there's no adjacent mines near it, we need to go and check it out, all of the mines in its adjacent to it, in its vicinity to it. In its vicinity, or that are adjacent to the cell would be the proper term, right? So we have in our board, we have our open method, we have our find mines, and now we need to basically do another method that's like find around cell, right? Like find all of the different mines, find the number of cells that are 0 that are around a specific cell, right? So like how would the logic for that work, right? So let's go ahead and let's just start off by creating the function. So we'll just call it find around cell because that's what it's going to do. So find around cell, we pass it in a cell that we're working with, right? And let's think. So find around cell. So it's going to be exactly the same thing as our find mines. We're going to be doing the same exact thing. We're going to be checking from our -1 position, where we're going to be checking from our cell, our middle cell, the cell we're at. We're going to be checking all of these different ones, and we're going to be doing this check at every single one of them. Okay? So that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be finding the mines that are near that, and we're going to open all of them. And when we open them, it's going to calculate, it's going to recursively call open, and it's going to call find, and open is going to call find mines, and it's going to find the mines near that, and it keeps on going around and just like this nice loop. It goes through loop. It's going to go through here. So we go through here. If this is 0, if this ends up being a 0, then it's going to go through here. It's going to check this for find mines. Find mines, going to open that, blah, blah, open, 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 open. And it's just going to recursively call upon itself, okay? So let's go ahead and write the logic out for that. So it's going to be the same exact thing as before. The only thing that we need to track in this case is the rows, all of the rows that we have, and we're going to check some stuff based off of the row that we're on, the position that we're in our board. Okay? So let's go ahead and we'll just say let rows equals this. Let's state that rows. And this let's state the rows is our board, just like we said before, which is just a list of all of our rows. All right? So now we're gonna go through each cell and open cells one by one until we find one with a mine. Until we find one with the mine, then we skip it. Then we stop. We stop. Okay? So now we're going to do the same thing as we did before. So for let row equals -1. Row is less than or equal to 1. Row plus plus. For we're going to go through all our rows, then we go through all of our columns. Column is less than or equal to 1 column plus plus. I forgot a semicolon, didn't I, again? There we go. Now, we're going to be checking for the same exact things, because the same exact thing where if we open this cell and we're checking this cell, we need to make sure that this is not in the edge and it's an actual position on the board again. So it's the same exact thing as before. So this function is going to be very similar. It's just the inner condition where we check for if it has a mine. We're going to be checking the cell that we're referencing rather than the cell that we're at. Okay? So It's the same thing as before, so we'll just, honestly, we could just copy this. You could just copy this. You could copy this, and then we're going to be changing this mines in proximity. We're not working with that, right? It's the same thing as before, but this time we're going to be checking that the cell that we're referencing, if it has a mine, and the cell that we're referencing isn't already open. All right? Because then we should open it. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if that like makes the clearest sense. It definitely going to do videos like this where I break it down into parts by parts. So you do that, and then you say this.state.rows, and do cell.y plus row, add our column. If the cell that we're talking about from the cell that we called has a mine, and the row that we're at actually, that's why I made this rows variable. If rows go through here, rows 0 and rows cell.y plus row cell.x at our column. If it's not open, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to open that cell. There, just like that. We're going to go and we're going to call open this cell that we're talking about. So we're going to say this.open rows cell.y plus row cell.x plus column. Right, and we're gonna go and we're gonna open it, and it's gonna call this open function, right? And it's gonna go and it's gonna find around the cell. So where do we place this find around cell, right? So where do we check for this in our open function? So what would be the when should it open around the cells? Well, we defined that in our requirements, right? If no adjacent cells have a mine, then we unhide it. So we only do it if the adjacent cells have no mines in it, all right? And then we go to next to it and we check for information. So it's going to be exactly that. So let's go ahead, and it's going to be very simple in our board. After we set our rows, we call this open around cell, right? So we'll say if the cell that we're clicking on doesn't have a mine, obviously, right? If it doesn't have a mine, and the number of mines that we found nearby it, right? The number of mines, remember, is from this find mines, the mines in proximity. The number of mines is equal to 0. Then we can go ahead and we can open up all the cells around that cell. So we can say this.open around cell. Boom. Right? Very straightforward. So let's go see if this works. Let's go make sure our logic is sound, right? Because we're just thinking in theory here. So that one was 1. That one was also 1. We're getting unlucky here. Oh, open around cell is not a function. What? Oh, I called it find around cell. That makes sense. Okay. Unlucky, dude. No, come on. Luck, please. One of these days I'll get it. Hey, look at that. Oh, look at that. It went until it wasn't able to find a mine, and look at that. So these are all mines. Eventually when we right click on it, we're going to want to do this. So if we click on that, oh, so we need to check our James status, because that's not how that should work. Also, our timer should increment when we click on that. Why didn't that happen? Whoa. Why isn't our cell? Let's go check our console, our React console. Time isn't incrementing. Huh. Let me think. So instead of that, we'll just do in our component will mount maybe. Weird. Let me see. Why isn't time incrementing? This dot tick. Oh, it's not starting because we haven't. Oh, we need to, so it's not starting because we didn't tell it how many cells have been opened, right? Because it can open more than one cell. Remember, if there's 0 nearby it, these are way more than just one cell that opens. So we need to actually go do that. Oh my god, I completely forgot about that. This is why we gotta think through it very carefully. Minesweeper's a complicated game. Not complicated in terms of making it, but just like there's a little quirks, right? So let's think. Where do we put this? Let's see. We count our mines, right? Then we go through our rows. We got a current. Cell already has read mine. Restart. Otherwise, this cell doesn't have a flag. Call until click. We open it. Do I ever set open cells? I never set open cells. Okay. That'll do it. So in the handle cell click. So then we're gonna say after we do this, then we're gonna say this dot set state. And set state, if you didn't know, set state can either pass in an object or it can pass in a function based off of your previous state. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna say this dot set state, and we're gonna say previous state. And what we're going to do is we're going to return our previous state dot open cells plus 1, right? We're gonna add 1 for every cell that we open. Let me think here. We're going to return an object that has opens. We're going to return our object, and we're going to say, we're going to take the cells in our previous state, open cells, plus 1. Right? We go into here, and that's what this is going to do. Right? So now, when we click on our mines, hey, look, our time is going. Nice. And that's what it should be doing. Awesome. So now we go into here, number of open cells is incremented to 46. And is that correct? 6, 12, 19, 26. Wait, 6, 12, 19, 26, 33, 40, 46. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's all good. Awesome. So now that we've gotten that, you go into here. Let's see. So now we've opened our cells. Go into here. Find around cells. So now we've found all the cells around it and we've opened all of them. So now, and what happens when we click on the mine, right? We basically need to end the game when they click on a mine. Also, that didn't show us, this is a mine right here. This is also a mine. So our mine thing isn't working. So let's go into our cell. Let's think here. In our cell. Why isn't it doing that? That's actually kind of weird, huh? That's supposed to have an M in it. So what's that? The third row. Why didn't it put a M inside of it? What? What? I'm actually so confused. If it's open, if it has a cell, if it has a mine, what's going on? Why isn't it showing that in here? Do we mark it in our board when we found a mine? That's actually, I'm actually so confused about that. Wait, what happened? Oh no. Where is this? Let's see. It's in here somewhere. So let's go look at this, right? Why isn't that? Good thing I wrote this out before. So let's go compare it to this. So let's go see. In our open, so we go. If current. Yep. Else. Let's open true current. Oh. Okay. So is is actually so interesting. I ran into this problem before. We go and we increment that, but I'm actually stumped. What the heck? Did I mess up my code in my cell function or something? Let's see. Alright. Props that is open. Alright, so if it's open and it has a mine, it should show that. That doesn't make any sense. What the heck? If it has a mine, then I'm actually so stumped right now. Hey Marks. Hey Milkstarz, you got me into developing. Been doing it for 3 months. Huge inspiration, man. Oh, thanks, dude. I appreciate that, dude. You just gotta keep working at it. You get so good so fast. Like, honestly, I've been working on React for the last like year and a half, and I'm just now like getting really good at it. Besides, obviously little bugs like this. Everybody just like, everybody has those days where you kind of like forget, like, you make like a little mistake and you don't know where it is. But like, I've been interviewing. I took some interview. I'm always open to like interview at different companies, and I've actually interviewed for a couple of senior positions, and I've been doing pretty well. So like, if you keep working at it, you'll actually get better. Because senior engineers are just people that had more experience with technologies and have seen some more stuff that have happened out in the real world. So don't ever underestimate yourself. If you're ever looking for this, is my one tip. Like, you're better than you think. Okay.